So I'm writing multi-character ensemble episodic television, and I'm writing a pilot for these multiple characters, which is kind of like writing a film. And you were just talking about exposition, and the dreaded exposition problem that I'm encountering is not making it sound like they're talking about themselves while I'm trying to introduce my audience to people that nobody knows anything about, but that I have to sustain over years if we're lucky. And so I guess I'm curious to know if you have, I don't want to put in like throwaway lines that will mean something in a year without anybody understanding it. That only makes sense to me now because we might not get picked up.
Sure.
So I'm curious if you have tips.
I know. It's really hard because you've got, what network are you pitching to?
ABC.
ABC. You got ABC executives there, and not always the brightest lights in the chandelier. Yes, I did. And so if it's over their head or they don't get it or they're confused, and so it's really hard. You got to give them enough exposition that not only the execs but that the audience will follow. Okay, but you can't. You don't want to write table dusting. It's really difficult. I can't tell you. I know. I mean, what can I say? You understand the principle, which is fine, and then you got to execute it. And there's no trick to it. When you get to the climax of this episode, number 3, looking back from that climax, ask yourself, how much did the audience actually need to know for this climax to work? And you'll often realize that actually there's too much here already. That in order for the climax to actually pay off that episode and hook the next episode, actually they don't need to know everything I've told them so far. And so the best way to judge whether or not to include exposition is in the light of the climax. And so you just look backwards from that and you realize, actually, no, if I kept this secret, if I hid that, or I didn't bother with this, that the climax would still work very well. And so that's the technique I used for years, was everything had to be justified in the script in relationship to the ending. Is this necessary to set up the climax? And if it's not, cut it. And so you got to have some kind of test and see, because you're not looking at the exposition in the light of the climax. You're looking at the exposition in the light of the executives. Okay? All right. And that's why it's tough, okay? But they always underestimate the audience. They always want to over-explain. They always treat the audience like idiots. It's part of the job description of a TV executive. Have no respect for these people, unless you're over on the anti-family side. And there we have nothing but respect. But over on the family side, they're always sitting there thinking, people are doing their ironing. I mean, I used to write episodic TV, and I would do things as visually as possible, and they would make me repeat it in exposition. And I'd say, we just saw it. They say, yeah, but Bob, people are doing their ironing. They may not notice that. And so you got to repeat it. And so it's always people are doing their ironing principles, and I can't argue. So you just have to find a way to do it. But you judge the relevance of exposition in the light of the climax. Okay.